Sound the alarm, sound all of the air horns and fog horns and emergency horns, whatever it is that you use to signify some sort of emergency. Because we've got an emergency podcast, coast to coast here. I am Joey Powell on InsideCarolina.com. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. All right, we're here unscheduled, so you know it's big news, as I'm sure all of you in Inside Carolina land have been waiting for months upon months upon months. We are grateful that you're here because we have some good things to talk about if you're a UNC fan. RJ Davis, you might remember RJ Davis, ACC Player of the Year, reigning Player of the Year, one of the top scorers in North Carolina history. He's coming back for his COVID year. He announced that today. And so we're going to talk about it and tell you what it means. Sherrell McMillan, tell us a little bit about the process and how we got here from when we finished watching North Carolina lose in the round of 16 to Alabama to as we sit today, where now it seems like RJ Davis, guard from New York, is going to be returning to Chapel Hill. Tell us how we got here.
Well, I think the first thing is, as soon as the season is over, it's an emotional time. It's a time where everybody is hurt, and pretty much every team except for UConn, where you're trying to figure out what's next. You're trying to figure out what went wrong, why you're not in the Final Four. And then, Davis's last game against Auburn was, wasn't his best work. It was his worst game of the year. So I don't think that factored into it, but it takes some time to kind of come down from that emotional low, come up from that emotional low or down from that emotional high. So I think he took the requisite time to do that. And after that, you start with kind of a checklist of processes. You talk to your inner circle, you talk to the coaching staff and get their feedback. You kind of let them know what you're thinking. And then you go to the undergrad or undergraduate advisory committee that the NBA has, which is filled with NBA executives and I think a couple of scouts. And they kind of put together a grade for you that says, if you enter the draft, you'll be drafted here or you'll be likely drafted in this slot. So I think you take all of that information, you work on any deals that you might have, and then you use all of that to come to a conclusion on what's best for you for next season. This isn't saying that RJ Davis won't have the chance to potentially play in the NBA one day, just that right now, the best decision for him is to come back to UNC. And I think it's a lot different from back in the day when guys decided to come back because there wasn't much of a financial incentive. Whereas now, RJ Davis will do well, being kind of one of the faces of college basketball. Like you said, Joey, he's the reigning ACC Player of the Year. He's the reigning Jerry West Award winner. He's a first team All American. He'll likely be a preseason first team All American and probably one of the favorites going into the season for National Player of the Year. So he will be a face of college basketball. And now that players are able to monetize their name, image, and likeness, I think he's going to do really, really well. So when you add all that together, this was the best decision for RJ Davis.
It's been really unique to watch him develop since he got to UNC from Stepanak. And, you kind of, he struck you as one of these playful, very jovial kid type players that used to get under Roy Williams' skin a little bit when they first got to campus. And watching him mature and watching him take ownership of this program, and the recently departed Armando Bacot also had a role in that. But seeing him really grow into his role as a leader this past year was probably something that North Carolina could not put a quantifiable number on. Sean, I am going to ask you to put something quantifiable out there. Just looking at some stats, he averaged over 21 points a game last year. He's top 10 in scoring right now, and we'll give Sherrell his regular flowers. And since that Sherrell said once he committed that if he stays 4 years, he will be in the top 10 in UNC career in scoring. So Sherrell's always got a good parking spot for that. But I mean, he's a guy that averaged 21 points a game last year. Shot almost 40% from three. Is UNC's all-time leading free throw shooter. Sean, would ask you if you wouldn't mind quantify what he means coming back to this roster this year.
I think you talked about the scoring aspect, but past 2 years he's been at 35 minutes per game. So you have, I think when the season ended and there's a lot of question marks about who's coming back, who are they looking at, etc. Now you have a guaranteed number one go-to option, and as you mentioned, all those accolades. So right there, you can almost pencil in 35 minutes a game at one of the guard spots. You can pencil in 20 points a game, and I think how that looks, I'm sure we'll get to, but I think it's probably reassuring for the coaching staff, the fans, everybody, knowing you have this one of the strongest pieces you can have. I think last year throughout the summer as well as the fall, when we were trying to anticipate how is this team going to look, we talked about, hey, there's the two main guys with Armando and RJ coming back, and then you're trying to fit around them. And a lot of that was projecting what RJ was going to do as that main guard, and we obviously saw how he stepped into that role. So I think for me, the big question is now how do those pieces fit around him? But once again, 35 minutes a game, 20 plus points, you can almost pencil in, knock on wood, being fairly injury free for next season.
Sean, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you think that the voting ACC media will perhaps make him preseason first team all conference next season? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think of the sure things in life, that's probably right up there. We always know that it's much easier to look in the past as to what somebody just accomplished versus projecting how they're going to fit into the new role. But I would be, I think it'll be hard pressed. You'll probably have a few Cooper Flag votes, but I think that's going to be an easy preseason player of the year selection, All-American selection. The big question is, does that check out at the end? Which I think you can look back at years past, and there's probably a lot of things that didn't actually happen in terms of the projections versus postseason. But with RJ, with that consistency, with his ability to score, with some different pieces around him, hopefully alleviating maybe some of that pressure he did feel in some of those games. I think it's you're not going to be you're not going to see your name on Twitter for picking RJ Davis as repeat player of the year.
I tell you who hopes, Joey. I tell you who hopes that he doesn't get picked ACC Player of the Year. That's
Hubert Davis.
Yeah, because I mean, again, in talking to people, I know he played coy. RJ Davis played coy for most of the year. I was like, oh, it doesn't bother me. I don't look at that kind of stuff. But talking to people who know him, like that, really, for lack of a better phrase, pissed him off. And
Good.
I think you saw the results of that, perceived disrespect that he received, and you saw how well he played. So Hubert Davis is like, please, no, don't vote him on the team.
Tommy Ashley and I are ones to like dogs. We're kind of like Craig's dad in Friday. That's my pleasure. Like we just love dogs all day long. And RJ has some dog in him. And Sean, I wasn't even going for ACC preseason player of the year. I was going first team. The fact that guy got left off the ACC preseason first team last year, it still is one of the biggest WTF moments of the season last year. But I digress. Sherrell, you've been following RJ Davis since he first got an offer from North Carolina, back when Roy Williams was still the coach. I want to ask you, what have you seen in his game that has held over? And then what have you seen about the player that has changed a little bit? And I was talking about maturity earlier, so you don't have to go there, but what have you seen about him that's changed a little bit since he's now been on campus for 4 years?
I'd say the scoring has been there. That's never changed, even though he struggled his freshman year. That was a strange time with COVID and lack of practice and lack of all the normal things that normal players get in normal years. So kind of scratch that one out. But the scoring, being able to get to the free throw line, that has always been there since, the first time we watched him, that was before his senior year. So that would have been like spring of 2019, I guess. But some of that stuff is still there. You can tell it's been repped thousands and thousands of times. Just the floater, the one-handed floater kind of in the lane has been repped thousands of times. A couple of the step backs have been repped thousands of times, just naturally in his repertoire now. As far as the growth aspect, I really think confidence. I know that's, it's hard to measure how you grow in confidence because he's always been a confident player, but each year it seems like he just knows that he's the best player on the court. Like it's gotten, his freshman year, it didn't seem like he knew that. Sophomore year, there were games where you're like, okay, he gets it. His junior year, kind of the same thing. Last year, obviously, he knew it from jump. And I think even his junior year, he was on pace to do something, maybe not what he did this year, but to do something special. And then he hurt his hand, and it took a while for that to heal. And then when he got healthy towards the end of the year, this was his junior season. He went on a bit of a tear at the end of the season too. So to me, it's just like him knowing he's the best player, on the court or on a particular team. And then I think the leadership stuff has grown a little bit. He's not a natural rah rah, like get in your face and it's time to play defense type leader. But I didn't think he's worked on that, and you can see it a little bit come out. He's not going to be George Lynch, calling everybody in the huddle, screaming at people, letting them know what they're supposed to do. But he has grown in that aspect.
Sean, I'm going to ask you the uninterviewable question of what do you think could be something that RJ Davis could add to his game before next season? Again, Sherrell just went through the litany of things that he has really repped thousands upon tens upon thousands of times and has really kind of perfected as a really reliable part of his bag. But I want to ask you, what's something you'd like to see him improve upon for next season?
Well, I mean, Sherrell hit it in terms of freshman year shooting around 32% from three, and then each year continually getting better. I think we did see, especially the floater and not settling for the 3-pointer, but working to get in the paint. Obviously, you're not going to change his size and what he can do offensively, but I think continued improvement in terms of that shooting off the dribble, whether that is from the 3-point line. Remember this year he started off scintillating, catch and shoot, but was really struggling off the dribble, whether that was maybe being doing a little too much, but that number significantly increased as the year went on. So I think from three, that'll be just a small area of focus. But I do think getting in that lane and pick and roll situations and what he's doing just from a decision-making standpoint. The hard part about that question, we know what the challenges are when he's going against length, right?
You can't make him 6'5". I get it.
If it's a Beekman for UVA or Griffin for Alabama, that's hard to, once again, can you improve your, getting the shot off a little quicker or maybe a few moves here and there, but that's just that's going to be a natural for those teams that do possess that. How is he doing? But once again, I think for me, it's really not so much from a skill set, what he can improve upon. To me, the whole thing as we go through the summer, and I'm sure we'll touch on a lot, but once again, it's going to go to the chemistry standpoint of how is he fitting in. I think last year, once again, Armando and him, the clear top two dogs, and everybody was either coming in with a chip on their shoulder and deferring to them a little bit from, say, a Cormac and Ingram, as well as a star freshman coming in, just trying to fit in. Now you have that star freshman coming back in year two. Maybe he's looking to be a little more aggressive offensively. Some of the other guys that are either returning or coming in. So to me, it's going to be all about how does the alpha dog of RJ, and that's when I was saying 20 plus. In an ideal world, maybe his points per game decreases just a little bit because that means everybody else is getting into the action a little bit more so. But to me, that just the chemistry standpoint is going to be the main thing for me versus, hey, can he improve his floater by a 1 to 2 percentage point? So we'll let Sherrell go, but those are some of my main thoughts as we go through this in the off season.
I was thinking, there's only a few teams who can throw guys like Griffin at him. You talk about what Kansas is going to have next year. Duke has Proctor coming back, and Proctor was able to bother him a couple of games. So like you said, those rangy, long 6'4", 6'5" guards. And I think that's an area that can be a focus for him is like what can I do when I have length on me to alleviate that? And you can work on that. There's a lot of 6'4" and 6'5" guys or taller that he can work with in the Smith Center or around the Carolina program to say, okay, what's my counter? When they put this type of defender on me, what do I do? I think this year is more about fine tuning and having those, if you're talking about boxing, like having a counter for a southpaw, essentially, like having something to do against a specialist, a 6'5", 6'6" guy. And I think you can develop those. Now, like you said, you can't make him 6'5", so he's the same height. But to me, that's kind of the next step, because there's really not a ton that can get better when you just had one of the, in my opinion, 2 best shooting seasons in Carolina history. So there's not really anything to get better that way. I think, maybe this follows a kind of an Armando Bacot kind of route. Armando's numbers were down pretty much across the board this past season, but I think he was a more
But
impactful player overall
you could
for
argue that he
UNC.
did more. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
I
right.
100% agree. Good call.
So it could be a situation where RJ, maybe he doesn't average 21 points a game, and he doesn't hit 113 threes or whatever it was. Maybe those are down to like 95 and 18.7, but his defense is better, and maybe there are times where he's on the ball more, and he's moving the ball more, where he's getting to the free throw line a little bit more. So I think that kind of growth in the margins is what we'll see. Like, there's nothing I think that materially is going to change overall about him or his game. It's just about getting better in those margins, in those special situations against tall players or against a tall front line. How do you finish the floater, like you said? I think those are the things are how he improves. And then, of course, can always get better defensively. That goes for everybody.
Yeah. Well, North Carolina fans definitely got a little bit of a present and something they can enjoy, because fifth-year senior, ACC Player of the Year, reigning Player of the Year, and one of North Carolina's all-time leading scorers is coming back for his free 5th year to Chapel Hill. So IC subscribers, UNC fans, everybody should be pretty happy with that development. It'll be fun to see what happens, and obviously we'll have plenty of time to talk about it as we move forward. But for this emergency edition of the Coast to Coast podcast, I'm grateful for Sean and Sherrell for jumping in here on short notice. We appreciate Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity sponsoring us. Make sure you check them out at johnnytshirt.com right there on East Franklin Street, or Congruity, congruityhr/Tar Heels. That's your free assessment. I'll tell you how they can save some money for your business. But we appreciate it. Shout out to John Siegley for producing, and we will talk to you guys sometime very soon on another edition of the Coast to Coast here on InsideCarolina.com.